Juneteenth.
To live independently. Alright. Okay, fellas. Happy Thank You to White People Day. Many white people pumped the brakes on their own bloodlines just so black people could continue theirs. Make sure you say you're welcome to every black person you encounter today, because it's Juneteenth. A day with no real history, as it purely serves as commie antagonization after the death of St. Floyd. There's nothing to really debunk, but leave it to an anonymous cartoon character on the internet to show you a deeper history and add context to the prevailing narrative around black Americans and the black identity. We're gonna start with a Vox video with 1.5 million views from Juneteenth 2020, which reads, "An historian explains the history and significance of the holiday." Note, this video was previously titled Juneteenth Explained. The title has been changed to better reflect the video's content, so as you can see, they didn't explain anything. It's, did you know slavery happened the whole time, but let's give it a shot.
Juneteenth is a deeply emotional moment for enslaved people because for decades, for centuries, enslaved people prayed for, hoped for, fought for in the form of slave rebellions, running away, bought their freedom when they could. And if you read slave narratives, if you listen to spirituals from the era of slavery, you know that enslaved people longed for freedom.
So in case you didn't know, black people were slaves. This is just slave day. Well, no, it's how one day they weren't slaves anymore because a war was fought. Quite a long war, about 4 years. A lot of white people died. More white people than black people died. We're not gonna learn anything, but hold on.
Enslaved people celebrating in public their newfound freedom was an act of resistance.
No, it wasn't, dude.
Remember, slavery came to an end after a 4 years bloody civil war.
You're welcome.
The bloodiest conflict in America.
Don't worry about it. You don't have to say thank you. We'll say you're welcome. Just behave better, please.
Want to see slavery abolished. Fought tooth and nail to block the 13th Amendment.
A lot of them don't regret it nowadays.
The military was necessary to make sure that enslaved people got the food, the medicine, the shelter that they needed.
You're welcome.
In order to survive. They're also there to protect, to the extent that that was possible.
Don't worry about it.
From violence, from recriminations, from slaveholders, from Confederates who still hadn't given up the fight. Every decade since the end of slavery, black people have been more educated, accrued more wealth, more status in American society. Every decade since 1865.
You're welcome.
But there's been one constant, and that constant is the presence of random racist violence.
And then they play the hits, a little Walk This Way, a little Love in an Elevator, whatever song that was from the Armageddon soundtrack. Just the classics, nothing from the back catalog, very standard set.
What I see in George Floyd's murder was a white police officer attempting to...
I'm sorry, dude, I'm sorry. I'll let you continue your little soliloquy in just a moment, but this is why people don't like you people. Am I allowed to draw that? Whose side are you on? Showing me that picture right now. Did a Groyper paint that himself? Is that racist or not? I don't know anymore. I'm sorry. It's very, very distracting. Didn't mean to get lippy with you just then.
Dominate and to subdue a black man who was not resisting, who could not resist. These are the kinds of stark realities that are highlighted during Juneteenth. If black people's lives can be expunged through racist violence and no one is held accountable, how free are we? Are we free?
What are you doing, man? You calling the cops again?
Yep.
All right. You know. All right. Are they on their way, Shaggy?
Yeah, they're here. You touch me, I get to hit you. You realize that if you assault me.
If I kiss you?
If you touch me in any way.
No, if I kiss you, just answer the question. Just say, if you kiss me, I will hit you.
If you touch me, I'm gonna...
No, say if you kiss me. So you're gonna let me kiss you?
You man.
I thought this was my hood!
Are we free?
That's okay. The cops are on their way and he'll be arrested.
What? Don't cry. You guys, my
No, we don't want it! No, leave!
Hey, sir, we're gonna call the police if you don't leave at 5
No, call the police! I'm fucking calling 911! I go to the safety groups. They told us to call 911 to your ass, and I'm getting
Why are you crying? Darkness.
Yeah, darkness.
The police are coming.
Go back to Duck Dynasty.
Do you want to hurt yourself?
Don't do this to me, man.
What? I'm asking you.
What did you ask me?
Do you want to hurt yourself or anybody else?
Darkness.
Huh?
Darkness.
Darkness. What's that mean? What?
Darkness, sir.
Okay.
How free are we? Are we free?
Yeah, I'd say you rank pretty high on the Global Human Freedom Index. Probably a few steps above the Nordic countries. Did you see the struggles that he had to go through just trying to live his life day to day, and the cops came by and completely harassed him? Oh, he was so brave. I can't believe he handled it so well. So now that I've given you two polarized extremes on this topic so far, I think it's time to really spread these legs open and see what's in between. Let's put this clam in an immobilizing contraption to hold her still and really dive into this slave narrative. Now, we've only ever heard of when slaves were freed in 1865, as the cartoon Black Girl told us. But what about leading up to that? How's about we have a civics exam in this country? How many states had abolished slavery at the beginning of the Civil War? Which state was the first to abolish slavery, and in what year? Oh, we're going into a little bit of history right now. Let me put my glasses on. So let me tell you about Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first state to effectively abolish slavery in 1783. Look at who's teaching you this right now. They always use the word history, but I'm doing the world's most cursory Google search to discover this history, and it's never discussed. I can't have pride in that? Alright, fine, I can't have pride in being white, but I can't be from Massachusetts and be like, yeah, we were the first ones to abolish slavery. You see how I don't feel anything when I say that? Because it doesn't matter. I mean, so now as far as we know, you know how the left loves to say, like, black people are starting on the minus 40 yard line, you're starting on like the 0 yard line, and like they're not starting at the same level as you. Well, the black people in Massachusetts had an 80-year head start. Even if tensions were still high, they had freedom 80 years before the slaves in the South did. Did it make a single difference? Sorry about that. That was the sound of me being sucked to the right at warp speed. 80 years of freedom from slavery, and what do we have to show for it? What am I supposed to say? As an honest journalist, well, how am I supposed to investigate this? Well, what's the reasoning that there could possibly be? Where you never hear that, like, oh, well, the black people in Massachusetts have been, more well off for over 80 years, and so they got a no, it's the exact same everywhere somehow. Dude, maybe we should measure their skulls. I don't know. I don't have an answer. But let's learn about a woman who sued for her freedom and won.
When we think of slavery, we think of cotton fields in the antebellum South. But at the time of the Declaration of Independence, slavery was legal in each of the 13 colonies. A lawsuit brought by a black woman known as Mum Bet would lead to its abolition in Massachusetts. Mum Bet was
Wow,
born a slave.
what a handsome woman.
Spent her adult life working in the house of John Ashley, a judge in the Massachusetts courts. Going about her work in the Ashley home, Bet overheard discussions about the 1780 Massachusetts Constitution. Later, she said, when she heard the words, "all men are born free and equal," it occurred to her that those rights should apply to everyone.
So you have an enslaved black woman who understands herself within this evolving narrative of democracy that is happening in the earliest moments after the Revolutionary War.
Together, they decided to do something revolutionary. They sued for freedom. Sedgwick presented in court, and the very next day, the jury voted in favor of Bet and Brown. They had won, making them the first people in Massachusetts to sue for and win their freedom. As soon as she was free, Mum Bet discarded her slave name. She renamed herself Elizabeth Freeman.
And as we all know, she is the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Morgan Freeman. Look at them. They look exactly alike. Almost as if they're the same biological sex. Yeesh. So this was a landmark case because the 1780 Massachusetts Constitution said that all men are born free and equal. And by the looks of her, she looked like she should have been born free and equal. So whenever they call you a racist, just remember I'm born and raised in Massachusetts, and I had to find this out myself, that we freed slaves over 80 years before the rest of them were freed, and it made absolutely no difference. They're gonna call you a racist no matter what. No matter what you've done in the past, it doesn't matter. They're just gonna call you a racist because it's a psyop. It's exclusively used to control your behavior. That's it. So racism doesn't exist. Get that out of your vocabulary. It doesn't mean anything. They're just trying to control you. I mean, how else could Boston have a race and sports problem? Reporting from The Guardian, by the way, WGBH. Can Boston shake its reputation as one of the most racist cities in America? I mean, all Massachusetts did was legalize interracial marriage in 1843. You know, 20 years before the slaves got their freedom. While slaves in the South were just being unshackled for the first time in their lives, we already had a generation of Africans running around. Look at me, a white man running his mouth again. Let's kick it back to the blacks to give us a good, proper history of Juneteenth. Take it away.
Well, last year, President Biden made Juneteenth the newest federal holiday. June 19th marks the date in 1865 when the last enslaved people in America found out that they were free. CBS News special correspondent James Brown spoke with renowned Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. about the history and the significance of Juneteenth.
Juneteenth was not embraced as a national black holiday for a long, long time, but it was kept alive by black people in Texas. And that's what's so sweet about it. Our people have been hungry for holidays, hungry for tradition, hungry for stories about black history.
Because
without a past, you have no future.
Huh, curious. Is that why they try to demonize the past of white people and then replace them in places of employment and in their own country with mass migration to eliminate their future? Nah, that's just the white part of me talking.
I'm Henry Louis Gates Jr. Welcome to Finding Your Roots.
by night, he is the host and producer of the PBS genealogy show, Finding Your Roots, as well as countless documentaries on Black history. Why do you think that June 19th stuck?
One of the reasons that I think Juneteenth stuck is that we're all charmed by the poetic brilliance of the name, Juneteenth. What better name for a June 19th could there possibly be? That's great. It's fetching. You know, it's catchy.
I love it. This decorated Harvard professor just gets to have a show on PBS about the race and genealogy of Black people. And then when it comes to the name, he's like, oh, it's just such a delightful little name, don't you think? Juneteenth? Oh, wonderful. Because if we don't have a past, we don't have a future. More on this race grifter in a little bit, but let's power through it.
As with all catchy names, Gates says there is also a bit of fiction around that day in 1865 when Gordon Granger issued General Order No. 3 to free the enslaved Black people of Galveston, Texas, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Well, we were raised to think that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, right? The problem is that the Emancipation Proclamation in and of itself didn't have the power to free anybody. Only about 500,000 enslaved men and women, we think, actually got their freedom from the Emancipation Proclamation. And James, there were 3.9 million enslaved African Americans. So the overwhelming majority of our ancestors were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation.
I love it. It's just such a recipe for racial division. Only talk about how no matter what was done for slaves, yeah, but it really wasn't optimal or good enough, and it really wasn't that effective, and there was still a lot of other things that had to be done. While on the other hand, never discussing the generations head start that black people in the North had. It's perfect. All while demonizing white people and trying to make them feel guilty instead of proud that they killed other white people for the freedom of black people because their religion was more powerful than this perceived racism. Nah, let's deconstruct whiteness until it's dust.
When I came here, I dedicated this tree in honor of my mother and father.
Professor Gates says the most important thing about Juneteenth is the era that came after.
The most radical thing that happened after the end of the Civil War for the rights of our enslaved ancestors were the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and the Reconstruction Acts. This was the first concentration of black power. In the summer of 1867, 80% of all eligible black men who were formerly enslaved in the South registered to vote. And in 1868, they actually voted. Ulysses S. Grant won the presidency. So you could reasonably say that black men had elected a president of the United States.
I'm learning so much right now. The equivalent of a Wikipedia search for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, Reconstruction era, but then what he's gonna add, something you're not gonna read about online, where you could reasonably say that black men elected Ulysses S. Grant. Is that reasonable? They voted for him, but they elected him? This is just so desperate. What is this holiday? Why does this guy keep popping up? He was in the last video, wasn't he? This is the same guy. Where's this guy keep coming from? Well, he's been shucking and jiving for over 15 years now.
I'm Henry Louis Gates, Jr.
6 days after Henry Louis Gates, a distinguished African-American professor at Harvard, was arrested at his home for disorderly conduct, the incident has reached all the way to the White House and reignited discussions about racial profiling.
I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that. But I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly.
Police initially responded to a call from a woman in Gates's neighborhood who reported someone was trying to break into the house. Gates was arrested after getting into a confrontation with officers.
Just bask in it. A black Harvard professor got arrested for disorderly conduct at his own home, and since the president was black, the president, of course, had to comment on it, making the local news story national news. To have a conversation about race. You know, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people back then didn't see how Obama was dividing people, because he seems like a nice, presentable guy. Like, this is a perfect time to talk about race and say that the police acted stupidly, even though he admits to not knowing a lot about it. You wanna find out what happened? You know what? Let's be fair. Maybe there was a great reason to push this story nationally and talk about racism. Maybe I'm wrong. What do I know? I'm some boogery cracker. So let's look at the details.
Hi, good morning. Since his arrest, Henry Gates has claimed that he was the victim of racial profiling. It turns out the arresting white officer was actually handpicked by a black police commissioner to have him teach recruits how to avoid racial profiling.
The apology won't come from me. I've done nothing wrong.
Sergeant James Crowley, an 11-year veteran of the force, is an expert on racial profiling, having
Oh, what a coincidence. I also am an expert in racial profiling.
defended his actions of 1 week ago.
I acted appropriately. Mr. Gates was given plenty of opportunity to stop what he was doing. He didn't.
And he placed the blame squarely on Professor Gates.
There was a lot of yelling. There was references to my mother, something you wouldn't expect from anybody that should be grateful that you're there investigating a report of a crime in progress, let alone a Harvard University professor.
Crowley also took on the president for his remark that Cambridge police acted stupidly.
I support the President of the United States 110%. I think he's way off base, wading into a local issue without knowing all the facts, as he himself stated.
Meanwhile, the president tried to diffuse the growing controversy.
From what I can tell, the sergeant who was involved is an outstanding police officer, but my suspicion is probably that it would have been better if cooler heads prevailed.
Can you believe a black Harvard professor had such a chimp-wristed reaction to an officer trying to have a conversation with him, and he escalated the situation into a shouting match, and then they had to detain him and put him in cuffs because he just wouldn't stop Donkey Konging? But there's gotta be racism here somewhere. Why were the cops called in the first place?
What's been reported, though, is that the guy forgot his keys, jimmied his way to get into the house. There was a report called into the police station that there might be a burglary taking place. So far, so good.
According to the police report, Sergeant Crowley arrived at the scene, went up to the front door, and asked Gates to step outside. Crowley explained he was investigating the report of a break-in in progress. As he did so, Gates opened the front door and said, "Why, because I'm black in America?" Awkward. Crowley was surprised and confused by Gates's behavior, which included a threat that Crowley did not know who he was messing with. Crowley then asked Gates for a photo ID to verify he was the resident of the house. Gates initially refused, but then supplied his Harvard University identification card. Crowley wrote that Gates repeatedly shouted requests for his police identification. Crowley then told Gates that he was leaving his residence, and that if Gates wanted to continue discussing the matter, he would speak to him outside. Gates replied with, "Yeah, I'll speak with your mama outside." So this Jimmy tries to jimmy his own door open, and then is surprised when the cops are called because it looks like he's breaking into a house. So instead of just showing the ID and being on his way, he had a racial chip on his shoulder, and it made it all the way up to the President of the United States of America. Anyways,
Juneteenth is one of the first holidays that black people created on their own. And of the holidays that they created in slavery times, Juneteenth is the one that survived and is now a national holiday.
Isn't it important for all Americans to understand that Juneteenth ought to be embraced by all Americans?
For a country built upon the love of freedom, any manifestation of the enjoyment of freedom should be celebrated by all our countrymen.
so let's end it here. All of these black advocates, especially ones at Harvard, are race grifters, and they're going to try to use your own values against you. Oh, you like freedom, don't you? Well, freedom means do whatever you want. It's like this, oversimplified definition of what you believe in. Oh, freedom? Well, they have freedom to freedom, so they can't freedom? You're getting away their freedom? Oh, do white people have the freedom to have a group without being called racist? No? Okay. Well, that freedom doesn't seem to go both ways. And what you consider to be history only revolves around a black identity while ignoring any sort of white identity, historically. The only white identity historically is going to be a negative one, and the only black identity historically and presently is going to be a positive one. The whole purpose of this holiday is to make it about black people, but act like it's about everybody. And it is about everybody, as long as they bend a knee to the blacks. When in reality, Juneteenth and the decades of progress leading up to it isn't just white history, it's a white phenomena. There are other records in history of an enslaved population getting a trial for their freedom 80 years before there was a war, 80 years before they were set free. That's pretty unique. So y'all better relax, okay? Or we're gonna put you back in chains. Have a good one.